Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Tuesday. I'm glad you're able to join us today. It's March, and I know we're all a little unsettled this week, knowing where we were this time last year. So hopefully you've been able to take a deep breath and things are calm and going as smoothly as possible. And hopefully we can have a normal spring break this year, because I know we all desperately need a little bit of time just to catch our breath. So we don't have a ton of stuff on the agenda today. I have posted the agenda in the chat so that you can access that. I'm just going to post it again, so those of you that are just now coming on can still access it. This is just our running agenda, so if you have not been able to join us for previous meetings and you're wanting to see what all was discussed or any links that might be there, you'll see this is the agenda that goes back from August. So previous links and things like that are there and available for you as well. I'm going to go ahead. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself for those of you that might be new to our call. My name is Melissa Algram. I'm the Director of Reading Sufficiency, and I am joined by three of my colleagues from SDE. Deb, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Trying to unmute. There we go. Hi, everybody. I am Deb Wade. I'm the Director of Elementary ELA. I'm glad you guys are here.
And then Brenda.
I'm Brenda Beamer-Chapman. I'm the Director for Social Studies and Personal Financial Literacy.
And Lauren.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lauren Jenks-Jones, and I am the Director of Early Childhood.
All right. Well, I'm so fortunate to have three such knowledgeable colleagues to help out with RSA, because you know it is one of those fun things that just always has some questions running around on that. Are we able to see my screen? Okay, thank you. So our agenda today, just first of all, as we keep going, if you have questions, if you will just place them in the chat, and Lauren and Brenda and Deb will be monitoring that and shouting those out as at appropriate times so that we can get those addressed. Real quick, I did want to address summer programming. So if you'll recall, if you were on our meeting last month, we had some concerns and confusions coming around with summer academy reading programs, summer programming, which grades, who can do what. This also went to the State Board of Education, and just kind of wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page as to where everything finally landed with this. So there was a board waiver at the last board meeting to allow for summer programming for our younger grades. So there's really two types of summer programming that we're addressing through RSA. There's our summer reading academies, summer academy reading programs. We call that SARP sometimes. It has its own specific statute, and in that it specifically states this is for third grade and above. This is the one that has specific administrative rules to it. You'll see those rules right there where you can go to them. And the purpose of this particular programming is for students who are needing help with being able to move forward to fourth grade, or for that ongoing intervention that might be required post third grade. So this is the one that is spelled out very specifically that it must be 4 weeks long, with 4 days in each week, 3 hours each day. I know I've had a couple of questions on this particular program, if that can be adjusted, and it cannot, since it's spelled out so specifically in those administrative rules. Another question that has come up is, can this be 2 weeks in June and then take a small break and have 2 weeks in July? That's fine. There's nothing in the rules or the statute that says those have to be 4 consecutive weeks. So that would make sense. And remember that it is okay to carry over RSA funds. You don't have to have them all spent by June 30th, okay? Also, when we're talking about summer academy reading programs for third grade and above, these are the ones that must be taught by a qualified teacher. And those qualifications would be either a certified reading specialist or having completed literacy first training, or having participated in letters training, and that could be any module for letters. So whether it's the foundations, the modules 1, 2, 3, the modules 4, or the more recent online version. The focus of this is on reading intervention and focusing on what's in the reading plan, helping students to complete their individualized reading plans, and that students can also complete portfolios or alternative assessments during this summer academy reading program in order to meet that qualification for promotion to 4th grade. Okay, so that's that version of the programming. The second one is just summer programming for all grades K through 3. This would have a focus on reading instruction, and if you're using those RSA funds. So it's still a need to, the idea here is that we're still focusing on that reading instruction. This isn't an enrichment camp or like a science camp type thing for RSA funds, because remember, RSA funds are for reading instruction. But it does not specify a specific schedule that must be maintained, and it does not have a specific qualification for who can teach it, okay? So hopefully that will help a little bit. So if I'm in a district, if I'm wanting to have summer programming for my 1st grade students and I need to use RSA funds to pay for that, as long as I have a focus on reading instruction, then I can go ahead and set that up, invite my 1st grade students. Ideally, these would be our students that are receiving intervention or that are needing that help. But again, that is a guidance, that is an ultimate district decision of who would be participating in that, okay? One of the things I do want to make you aware of is that as we currently have, with RSA funding, we track that through our OCAS codes, our Oklahoma Cost Accounting System codes. And right now we only have the one code to indicate summer programming, regardless of what that programming is for, whether it's a summer academy or just a summer, an ongoing summer intervention program. So we will be working this month, the remainder of this month, to get those OCAS codes updated and that out to you, so that if we can help kind of differentiate between how schools are spending their funds. And that's really just so that when we are asked, are schools having academy programs, or are they just providing summer programming, or which is which, we will have a way to answer that question, okay? Were there any questions that popped up in the chat about that? Because I know that that was a big point of contention last month, and I wanted to make sure we were all pretty clear about what that is. Okay, Brenda, you're saying no, good to go. So if anything does come up, let me know, but hopefully that will help with what you're needing to do for your students, and move on forward from there. Also, OSTP is coming up. So we have seen the information from from the federal government that we are still going to be having our state test. I know our assessment department is geared up and ready and has been sending out a lot of information. What I wanted to make sure that everyone on this call was aware of is that for early RSA reporting for grade 3, those tests must be completed by May 3rd. That is the date that is set out. And that RSA preliminary data for 3rd grade will be available in the portal on May 24th. Okay, so those are 2 dates that you might want to be aware of. Remember, if those of you that are new dealing with RSA and the OSTP, if you weren't having to, if you're new in the last year or 2, since we didn't have this last year, 3rd grade students will receive an additional score that students in other grades do not receive. So all students that take the OSTP receive a score of either advanced, proficient, basic, or below basic. 3rd grade students, in addition to that, also receive a score for RSA criteria that says met or not met. That's the score that we look at for promotion decisions based off of if they're meeting that first pathway or not. Is that met or not met? Okay. When we look at that, there are not any students that score advanced or proficient that do not meet RSA criteria. I've not found one in any year since we've started this. Where the majority of our students that do not meet RSA criteria also score below basic. We will have a few students that score basic that will not meet RSA criteria. And conversely, we may have a few that score below basic that do meet RSA criteria. It gets very, kind of goes back and forth that way. So keep in mind that as you are looking at that, you are going to want to really look at that RSA criteria score when you are considering promotion and retention decisions. Okay, so talking about promotion and retention, because I know that's what's on everyone's mind, wanted to make sure that we are all aware of this flow chart. So those of you that have been playing with RSA for quite some time, this should be very familiar to you. But I know we always have people coming on that are new. With this decision flow chart, we always start with pathway 1. This is our OSTP score. Students who meet RSA criteria on the OSTP are eligible for automatic promotion to 4th grade. All that means is that we would not retain that student under RSA, because every year I get the question, but we feel that as a district, the student should be retained. Can we still retain the student? You can under your own district policies, but not under RSA, okay? And I think we've got somebody that needs to be muted. We're getting a little bit of feedback. Thanks, Lauren, for taking care of that. So for documentation, you would just need to make sure that the record of their OSTP scores are in their permanent record so that if they move, a receiving school knows what happened. If the student does not meet RSA criteria on the OSTP, the next thing you would look at is their screener score for our pathway 2 for promotion. Do they meet the grade level target for the end of year 3rd grade? So for example, if they're taking the STAR assessment, have they met a 392 at any time during 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade? If so, even if that 392 is not their most recent score, let's say they dipped back down a little bit, but if they've met that end of year 3rd grade target, then they would be promoted, and then document what assessment they took and when that date was met. If you're not sure what the scores are that you are looking for end of year 3rd grade, remember that you can come over here to the RSA coordinator website and look at the technical guidance. And I'm just going to pull up Acadience. And if I come to this very back page, it's this great big red number for the end of year 3rd grade at the 40th percentile for Acadience. It's a 347 on the composite score, okay? That's what you're looking for the promotion retention for pathway 2, okay? All right. If they have not met that screener at any time, then you would also consider, have they met any good cause exemptions? Do they meet that criteria? Remember, we have 7 good cause exemptions. The first being EL students that have had EL for less than 2 years. The second being students participating in the OAP, the Oklahoma Alternative Assessment Program, or sometimes we call that the portfolio test for state testing. Exemption 3 would be meeting an alternative assessment such as the SAT-10, the Terra Nova, or the ITBS at the 45th percentile there. Exemption 4 would be a portfolio. Exemption 5 are students who are on an IEP but take the regular OSTP, take the regular state test. Now remember, this one changed last year. In the past, it's been students on an IEP and have been previously retained. And starting last year, that previous retention was removed from the requirement. So now it reads, students who are on an IEP and are making adequate progress towards their IEP goals. And that's determined by the IEP team. So it does not mean it's an automatic pass for all students on an IEP. What it means is that if I have an IEP, and again, it's stressing reading or language, that my IEP team is going to decide, have I made progress to be able to move forward? The majority of the time, that answer is generally yes. But there have been a few times where schools have said, there are some circumstances here where we do not feel that promotion is appropriate in this situation. And that gives the school that opportunity to take in those extenuating circumstances. Exemption 6, again, saw a change that went into effect last year, was previously for students who have been retained 2 years. It now says for students who have been retained 1 year. So it took that 2nd year retention out. And that was one that we have heard many, many times from districts across the state saying 2 years of retention by 3rd grade is just way too much. And that needed to be fixed. So remember that also considered a retention would be if they participated in a transition class. So like a T1 class, and I know there's several districts that have been asking about looking at T1 classes this coming year. That is considered a retention year for this purpose. Another thing to consider is that for pre-K retention, if it's for academic reasons, is considered retention. So that would need to be noted in the student's file. This would not just be where somebody wants to give them an extra year to mature or grow. This is, we feel that for academically, they're not ready to move forward to kindergarten. Okay, and I know that can be interesting to interpret sometimes if that's not noted very clearly in the file. And then finally, good cause exemption 7 would be an emergency exemption that this is granted by the Office of Assessment. This is not like somebody had the flu and missed a week of school. An emergency would be, this is a student who's, this is the one that always comes to mind. The student was involved with a car accident with their family and had a parent who passed away as a result a week or two before the test. I mean, something where they just truly had an outstanding emergency that cannot even be expected to deal with the test, much less having to deal with anything with retention and promotion. So if they meet one of those exemptions, then obviously we retain and we put that documentation in their file. If they don't meet RSA criteria on pathway 1, and they do not meet the screening on pathway 2, and they do not meet any of the exemptions on pathway 3, then what we have left is our student reading proficiency team. That student reading proficiency team is made up of the 3rd grade teacher responsible for on grade level reading instruction, a 4th grade teacher, and the family, a parent or guardian, that will meet to determine if the student's needs would best be met through promotion or retention. And then that decision is signed off on by the principal and superintendent. This team must make a unanimous decision to promote. And if they decide to promote, that student continues to receive appropriate intervention throughout 4th grade, regardless of how they are scoring at the beginning of 4th grade, they must receive that intervention. If there is not a unanimous decision to promote, some want to promote, some want to retain, regardless, then that student is to be retained. And at that point, RSA is over. That's the end of the chain. So if you have let's say a scenario where you have a SRPT team and the school members are recommending retention and the parent does not agree, because this happens often, that is not a unanimous decision to promote, because we have 1 or more members on the team saying we want to retain. So that student has to be retained. The only recourse left if a parent wishes to continue to have a conversation about that would be under your local school board policies. But at that point, state law pretty much stops and says, this is where we retain. Okay, so school administrators, you have it within your rights to say, this is it, we're done. This is where we are. But you would want to follow your board policy on how that conversation would or might continue at that point. Again, if we retain a student, we would make sure that that student is receiving intervention throughout all of 3rd grade, that 2nd year of 3rd grade. Even if they come back and they are scoring above that grade level target at the beginning of 3rd grade, this is their 2nd year. And so we would expect that grade level target to be a little bit high at the beginning, but they tend to quickly drop off. So they receive intervention throughout their entire retained year in 3rd grade. Okay. So just worth going through that flow chart and making sure that we have that. We will be sending out a more comprehensive, in-depth guidance for promotion, retention decisions. It's done. We're just waiting for this to go through our approval process. We don't ever send out guidance until it has gone through a rigorous approval process through our office and through our department to make sure that we don't have errors there that we might have to retract later. So we're waiting on that approval process to be finished so that we can get that published for you. But you will definitely have that before you need to start making these decisions. Remember that promotion retention decisions begin with our state test scores. So at this point in time, and I know I've had a few districts saying, we're ready to have parents sign off on this. It's a little early. it is very appropriate to have a conversation with the family saying, we are concerned about Johnny's performance. Retention might be a factor that we need to consider and discuss, but it's not to the point right now where we need to make sure that a parent signs off on it, especially if they have reservations about it, because I'll guarantee their next stop will be to call me, where I'll be saying, we don't have OSTP scores yet, so there's nothing that we're doing under RSA quite yet. So like I said, it's very, very appropriate to say we have concerns and little Johnny needs to step it up, or here's what we need to do to help, and they need to come to school, or those types of things. But to sign off on a document saying Johnny is going to be retained next year under RSA, it's like I said, we need those OSTP scores back before we start heading down that path. So those, as a result, those forms are being updated. I was hoping to have those done by today's meeting, but again, they've kind of got held up in our review process and a few other things that are going on in the agency right now. So we will have those ready for you, again, well before the time that you would actually need them for parents to be able to sign off on them. One question that has come up quite a bit is if a third grade student does not participate on the OSTP. I know I'm seeing a lot of opt-out conversations taking place on social media, and it does every year, but even more so this year. If third graders do not participate in the OSTP, that is fine. That is not an automatic promotion or retention. What that means is we would treat that the way we treated all third graders last year. So if my third grade student does not take the OSTP, then the next thing is I would look on my pathway. This is not an option. So we would go to pathway 2. How do we do on our screener? Do they qualify for an exemption, or is this an SRPT issue? Okay. So keeping in mind that flow chart, if they don't take the state test, we just start on the next box. This would be an automatic no because they did not meet RSQ criteria. Does that make sense?
Melissa, can I ask a quick question?
Sure, Diane.
Okay, so I understand that you want to start with the state test scores, but you know, the scores don't come back till the last day of school for us. And so what we normally do is we start with students that we go ahead and have conferences with students that we know go ahead and qualify for an exemption or have already hit, you know, obviously ones that hit the screener, we do out. Can we not go ahead and do that? And then we have a little group left that we're waiting on the test scores for.
No, yeah, you can do that. I just, where I would caution was, I think where I was more concerned was when we were having these conversations and wanting parents to sign off in February or beginning of March.
Okay.
Yeah, but when we're talking about the end of May, you know, right now we've still got quite a bit of school left. So, but yeah, it's by May, we generally have a good idea. And you're right, there are just going to be a small group of people that are going to be right there on that edge.
But it's okay to go ahead and do those exemption
Sure.
things at the 1st of May or what?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
And you might even, the other question that has come up in the past too is, hey, we had a student that we recommended retention, the parents signed off and they came back and they actually did meet RSA criteria. At that point, you can still retain that student, but it would be under your district policy. So you'd want to let the parent know, here's what happened, here's what we still recommend. If the parent changes their mind, you'd follow your district procedures at that point. Okay. All right. I think
We have a few questions, Melissa, if you want to stop and take them.
Perfect. I figured, oh darn, I knew I wasn't going to get away without questions.
So I'll just go to the ones that are recent and go back up. So
Okay.
Once again, can the school have an SRPT meeting before the scores arrive in case they're going to be promoting? I think you answered that, but
yeah, they can. I certainly would not do it right now. I mean, if we're talking closer to the end of the year and that time, but yes, keep in mind the extenuating circumstances that might happen and be ready to communicate that to parents of what if they go ahead and meet RSA criteria type thing.
okay, so the next one is, would you please restate on pathway 3 when a third grader was retained last year? Did you mention that a second year retention is not required and we can promote?
That's correct. So under good cause exemption 6, that used to be 2 years previous retention. For starting last year and then moving on obviously forward to this year, if that student, that third grade student, has been previously retained in any grade, they qualify for that exemption.
Okay, so another question, will the flow chart be on the actual RSA page?
That's a great suggestion, and I'd be happy to put that on there. So let me jot that down before I forget.
That way, if they lose this, they can have it.
Not a problem.
Okay, so what documentations or forms from schools must be turned into the district RSA coordinator for audit purposes and kept for 5 years between end of year and before the beginning of next year?
Okay, so we will need to make sure, last year, remember, we got it all down to one form, and I just need to make sure that we take off the stipulations for our not having the RSA test this last year. Let's see here. I believe we had that. Try not to make anybody sick as we go through here. Where do we have that? Individualize, there we go. And documenting third grade promotion and retention decisions. Okay, so what I'm trying to get done is removing, like, we did not take OSTP, that's not actually the case this year. This form would be sufficient. This would take care of all of it for any promotion or retention decision. Once we get this updated for the 2020-21 school year. Anything else that might be needed, we'll make sure that we have noted in that guidance. Like, you need to make sure that there's an IEP in place if they're under good cause exemption 2 or 5. You don't necessarily have to have another copy of the IEP in their file, but you need to make sure that it is currently in place and there. Okay, that type of thing. What else, Brenda?
Okay, pathway 2 scores would be documented on an SRPT form. That was a question.
Also remember, we have that where we can put that, you can write that on here. We also have it on their individualized program of reading instruction, where they can note what their scores are and when they meet that. Okay, so if they need that documented on one of those forms, that would be perfectly fine. So it's in there. Another thing, in the one district I know, with the screener that they use, they just print off that final report that shows the date and the score that they met, and they attach that in there so that they have that proof. So whichever one is probably easiest for you would be perfectly fine.
Okay, so will we need to make a form for every student like we did last year?
No. What we will need for this year is students who meet RSA criteria on the state test. That's in the past, before last year, was about 80% of our students, knowing that we'll probably have a little fluctuation this year, but the vast majority of our students meet that. You don't need to do additional paperwork for those students. I mean, those scores are already part of their files. They're done. So nor will those students be on our third grade promotion and retention report. So that report that we do on the wave in the fall will only include students who do not meet RSA criteria on the state test, which will make that report quite a lot shorter. So.
Do we send notice to first or second grade parents for the students that have met RSA requirements?
We are, as far as on the screening assessment goes.
I'm assuming that they
Okay, I'm going to assume that this is
I'm going to assume.
addressing the screening. And remember, it's the end of year third grade score. So, like, for example, if your school takes STAR, it'd have to be on STAR reading, that 392, not the STAR early literacy, because that's not addressing third grade skills. Yes, we are supposed to let parents know once they receive that, basically a way of saying, your student has met this, they are eligible for promotion. However, we're going to continue to meet their academic needs. You know, those things that we say to parents of, you know, that doesn't mean that you're ready to go to fourth grade if you're in second grade right now. It just means that they're showing proficient reading skills at the foundational level.
Since pre-K is not legally required, does retention in pre-K count?
Retention in pre-K for academic reasons, it specifically does say in statute, can be counted for retention. Yes, for retention purposes. So if you did have a student who was participating in pre-K, even though it's not legally required, and the school team decided the student is not academically ready to move forward, then yes, that would count as a year of retention. And I know that gets into a whole big mess. It's confusing, but the way our legislators wrote it.
I think you've already answered this one, but is the promotion retention form used for every student, even if they've never been on a plan?
Yes, that would be, because the majority of our students who are there should have been on a plan, likely. But you know, we always have those surprises that come along where somebody who is perfectly capable but decides they're not going to do the test, and you know, they go from there. So yeah, the promotion retention form would document, this is just a promotion retention decision. So you are, it's perfectly allowable that if you felt that it would be appropriate to document that, you know, and generally if they've not been on a plan, it's because they've met that grade level target. But again, that small percentage, maybe they've been on track, but they just haven't met the end of your third grade target. So you could note that they've been on track, they just aren't there yet.
If the parent wishes to have a virtual or phone meeting due to COVID, would we just note that?
Yes. And we did that last year. Remember, with that form, we have a place where the teacher can document that this was a virtual meeting and just attest that people were on the phone. And that part's just not going to go away, I think, for a while. We have parents that are still not comfortable coming in for face-to-face meetings. And so that allows for us to be able to have that. And sometimes it's just a matter of ease too for our teachers. So.
With the new digital forms, how do we exit a student who has met grade level targets? Are students automatically exited at the end of the year and stay exited if they are not put on for the next year?
Okay, remember, we don't collect the names of students who are on or not on plans at the state level. That's kept at the district level. So as far as you're just looking at the numbers of students, since that's what we turn in at the state level. So if Brenda was on a plan in second grade and she's where she needs to be now by the end of second grade, she's no longer on a plan, that's great. We'll indicate that at the end of the plan saying she's met her plan goals. She's no longer on that plan. And at the beginning of third grade, we'll do that screener and hopefully she's maintained the growth that she made and won't be on one in third grade.
Okay, looks like one more.
Okay.
So those that met the benchmark on their third grade test but didn't meet criteria on OSTP, they need the parent third grade proficiency notice, or does any third grader hitting the benchmark need it?
Okay, let me repeat what I think I just heard. So if I have a student who met the end of year grade level target for third grade, okay, so but they did not meet criteria on the state test. So in other words, that student does not qualify for promotion under pathway 1 on the state test. However, if they met that end of year grade level target on the screener, even if they did not meet criteria on the state test, that qualifies them for promotion on pathway 2. So we would fill that out and they're being promoted by the screener on pathway 2. Okay. So we will assume for anybody that we do not see a form for that they were promoted under pathway 1. Anybody we see a form for will either be pathway 2, 3, 4, or they were retained. And let me come back to this form real quick. Notice that we do have pathway 1 here on this form. That again, we don't need this form filled out for these students. That's why there's not a checkbox in front of there. And I will put a reminder on here that this form does not need to be filled out for students on pathway 1. The reason we did not want to leave it off of this form though, is it gets really confusing, especially for people who are new to RSA, to say, wait a second, why are we starting with pathway 2? What happened? So that way we can remind people, pathway 1, this is the OSTP. This form does not need to be completed for students meeting pathway 1. Okay, we don't need to make extra paperwork for ourselves unless you just really like to do that. And if that's the case, go have fun. So,
Okay, I lied. There's more questions now.
well,
Okay.
let me get to one real quick that I know I got in an email this morning. So while we've got a little bit of a pause there, because I don't want her to think I'm going to forget about her. So the question has come up of we have students who have been meeting grade level targets throughout, and they met the grade level target at the beginning of the year. They met the grade level target at the middle of the year, but they've recently done a screening assessment, and all of a sudden they've dropped back down. Does that student now need a reading plan written for them? And I'm going to say at this point in the year, that really does come down to a district decision. If the beginning of the year, there's really no question. If that student's below the grade level target, that student needs a reading plan. They need to be getting intervention. The reason we have a mid-year assessment, really around December, January, is for the same reason, because sometimes we have kids come in strong, but then if they're not making that progress, then they need a plan written at that mid-year point. By the time we're getting now to the end of third quarter, sometimes writing a plan now, that is going to be up to the district of is there something that you can be doing that would have an effect? Because I know that we're getting ready to go on spring break. We're going to come back for a couple of weeks, and then we're going to move into testing. And a lot of times those interventions are really difficult to maintain during that time. If they have been doing what they need to do all along and they've just suddenly dipped, now we're getting spring fever, I'm going to say that really is going to be that district decision of what do we do at that point, if that makes sense. So with our universal screening windows, the ones that are dictated by our state law, beginning year, middle of year, no question, they need to be on a plan if they're below that grade level target. But when we're talking about afterwards and we're getting towards the end of the year, then I'm going to say that's really kind of more of a gray area where the district needs to make a decision. Do you have the resources and the time to be able to have an effect? What can we do for that kid? I'm not saying completely ignore them. If they've suddenly dipped, I would take a good look at why do you think that might be? Is there something going on that, are they struggling a little bit? Can we do a little bit there through differentiation? Do we need a full-blown plan? How much have they dipped down on that? But keeping in mind, the purpose is if we've seen a student that's struggling, how are we going to help them? But at the same time, we may not be able to have time to pull them in for full-blown plan meetings, interventions, that type of thing. The secondary question to that was, then do we need to have 2 scores or 2 signatures? Remember that the point of having the signatures from a parent is to make sure that we're giving them some information. So if I have Deb who starts on a plan at the beginning of the year, and I meet with her parents in October for our conferences, and we have their parents sign off that, yes, I understand Deb is struggling and we're going to do this to help her at school and at home. And then we want to be able to give them a mid-year update. Hey, Deb's doing a great job. She's met her target, or, we're continuing to struggle. Here's what we're going to do. That's the purpose of our 2 signatures, is not just to say, hey, parents, we've got a problem, and then not give them any updates. Take another scenario. Deb's doing fine at the beginning of the year, but starts struggling in mid-year. So we initiate a plan at our mid-year. We need to have the parents sign off on that because, again, we have to let parents know Deb's struggling and here's what we're going to do for her at school and at home to help her get better. If it's feasible to have another conference with the parent before then, great. If not, it's okay. The point of the 2 signatures is when we're looking at a full year plan, we don't want to go a full year with only communicating with the parent at the beginning. We want to communicate with the family throughout the year. But when we're looking at a half-year plan, it makes sense that it's okay if we only have that 1 signature on there. If that makes sense, okay? So I think sometimes we get hung up on the number of signatures rather than thinking about why we're trying to make sure that we're communicating that with the family, okay? All right, so Mary, I hope that helps answer your question. If not, shoot me an email and we'll chat a little bit more about it. Okay, Brenda, what else you got for me?
For the virtual signature, do we need a screenshot of the chat box or just the check box and type their names?
Just the checkbox and type their names would be fine.
Okay. On the new form, where do we note if they're coming off the plan or need to continue? There's not a box anymore.
On the IPR form. Okay, I will look at that. I will look at that and I'll have to get back out with you on that. So can you flag that question for me?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we need 2 parent signatures if they only needed one in the spring? I think you just
I think, yeah, we just addressed
did
that.
that. For students who have been on a plan throughout the year, then do meet criteria on the test. Is it helpful to have a form to communicate with parents to make sure they are kept in the loop?
I think it would be helpful. It is certainly not required under law, but I think it would certainly be helpful for your own record keeping and sure go a long way to maybe help that parent understand what's going on and how we're going to help their student.
Okay, I think that's it, unless I missed one while I was scrolling.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go over the rest of this little part, and if anything else comes in, we'll address it then. So we like to make sure that you have some resources, and knowing that we're going to have spring break, because we all want more to do over spring break. There's a couple of virtual live events that are coming up that I wanted to make sure you were aware of. One next Monday, the first day of spring break. AIM Institute out of Pennsylvania does a free symposium, virtual symposium every year, and it's excellent. But this will be on Monday. The times are 7:30 to 2:30 Central because obviously they operate under Eastern time. The focus for this year is the role of early identification and implication for school-based intervention. So they're going to be spending a lot of time talking about screening and diagnostic assessment and how to use that information to assign interventions. So this could be a really helpful seminar to be listening to for some different information about how to be better stewards of our data and apply that. The link here is for the registration. You'll also see kind of the agenda. You don't necessarily have to attend all day. You might just say, hey, I want to just listen to this one part. The one really nice thing about this is they will, if you register, they will also send out the recording to you. So if you're not able to attend, if you're on the beach on Monday and would just like to listen to this some other time, first of all, you forgot to take me with you, but after that, this would also be a nice thing to have in your toolbox. Also, the Reading League is getting ready to do on Thursday evening a seminar on using read-alouds to improve comprehension with children with autism, intellectual disorders, and speech language impairments. There is a $10 fee for this one, but it also includes access to the recording. So just making you aware of that as well. And finally, Reading Matters is going to be a new series. Dr. Mark Seidenberg, if you've ever heard me talk about the book, Reading at the Speed of Sight, this is, he's a very knowledgeable person about early literacy. And then Dr. Molly Ferry Thorne are starting to do some ongoing conversations with experts, and they're looking at a variety of topics here. So on this, you'll see the different dates. This next one is coming up. It looks like they're hitting Sundays at 3 p.m. and some different information. I love this one on Sunday, March 28th about how to build a daily schedule based on the science. So that could be a really helpful, and then becoming a critical user of your curriculum with Margaret Goldberg. Some of those would be very interesting to kind of listen to. I do not know if these will be recorded and sent out or not. They do say they will be recording them and posting the recordings at this site. So if you're not able to do that, you can just come back and then come and catch the recordings as well as on YouTube. Guess I didn't read well enough. Finally, there's some recorded events wanted to make you aware of. Recently, the Reading League Oklahoma did a professional development on sight words going beyond flashcards. And the recording of this has been made available here. It was extremely well attended and a lot of practical uses, just things that teachers can immediately do when addressing sight word instruction, and some considerations that need to be made. And then finally, Amplify did a Science of Reading Symposium. The recordings have now been made available. There were over 18,000 teachers across the nation that registered for this symposium, and then they turned away thousands more. Just this is how much people were wanting this information. That it's, I know Deb, you've been listening to some of the sessions there and have said that you have found them very interesting and helpful as well. So kind of something to kind of peruse as you have some additional time. So, okay, did we have any additional questions that popped up that we need to be aware of?
Of course.
Of course we did.
So just confirming that third graders that met RSA requirements on the test will not need any form in their permanent file.
That is correct.
Okay. There's someone asking if you could post a link for the schedule of the webinars up there. I think you were.
Yeah, the link is right here. Actually, you can go to any of these to see that, but if you're looking at the ones that have on Sundays, that would be with this link. You'll see the schedule right there.
Okay. And then someone said you'd mentioned a couple of times on earlier webinars about podcasts for reading that were good, and someone's going to be driving, so they were interested in hearing.
Absolutely. And this
again, which ones you'd recommend?
So this is why we do a running agenda, because as much as I like to post these every time, I try not to make you seasick. If you'll come down to last month's meeting that we had, you'll see 3 of the podcasts here. If you've not listened to Emily Hanford's podcast, I would start there. I think that is a really good way of kind of getting your head wrapped around some of that. I like all of them. Lauren, Deb, I know you've been listening to some of these. Do you have some input about where somebody might want to start or really pay attention to?
I think that Emily Hanford one is really, if you're not going to listen to any of them, listen to that one. I think it's just a really clear and articulate view of all of the things that we've talked about.
I agree. I think it's very succinct. It kind of hits that overview that I know I needed. And Melissa mentioned the symposium that Amplify did, and that's digging into some of the details that Emily talks about a little bit more. And so it was nice to have that overview before going into something in a little more depth.
You'll see she's done a series of 4 podcasts. So it starts with the most recent up here at the top. You could start with this hard to read, and then hard words, which is really where I started coming in on this. At a loss for words is really amazing, but she really started hitting too with vocabulary about what the words say and how we address or don't sometimes address a vocabulary instruction with our little people in this particular podcast. So those are really interesting. And you can also read with what APM Reports has done. They've got maybe an article, but the podcast gives you so much more information than the written article does. So I would really recommend listening to the podcast. It's the way it was written to or intended to be published was through that medium. So okay, what else?
Unless I missed something scrolling, that's all the ones I see.
All right. Well, we will stick around in case we have a few last minute questions that come up, but we greatly appreciate your attendance and some of your great questions. And I love the suggestions. Thank you for suggesting to get the flowchart on the RSA page. We will make sure that happens. That's sometimes some of those things that are helpful to you is I've lived it so much, I just forget that this might be something that would be helpful. So I appreciate those suggestions. So for all of you that are traveling, please be safe over spring break. If you're staying at home, I hope you have some time to just catch your breath, relax, and do something that just helps refresh your soul a little bit. I know I'm sending my husband and all 3 of my children out of town for a couple of days, so I'm really looking forward to that personally. If they would only take all the animals with them, that would be great. So Anything else that's coming up? That we really do appreciate how much everyone has done with such a challenging year.
A lot of thank yous for answering all their questions if you're not watching the chat.
Oh, thanks. I hadn't had this up yet. So, all right. So guys, have a great rest of your Tuesday, great end of the week, and we will see you again in April. If anything comes up between now and then, let us know. We will try to get some more information out for you as quickly as we can. And I appreciate your understanding of quick does not always mean you're quick when we're talking about all the hoops we jump through before we get answers out sometimes, because as my colleagues will attest, sometimes it has to go through about 5 or 6 people before I can actually get the answer out to you. So we're working on it. So, all right. Let me say, I don't think anything else is coming
I
up.
don't see any other questions.
That's okay.
Oh, someone has a dyslexia question. If you just want to unmute and ask it, go ahead.
What's up, Sharon?
Hi, Melissa. I went back and watched last month's meeting. And in our district in August, we offer GCN training, and dyslexia was a 45-minute presentation with certificates awarded.
Okay.
I myself did all the training on what was offered on the next thought, and it was more time consuming.
Sure.
Thought. And they've already done a 45-minute K through 5. Will that suffice?
I would, I'm going to put Michelle DeBerry's email in the chat real quick for you. And she's actually in the Office of Special Ed. I can't type and talk at the same time, apparently. Hang on a second. Michelle is in the Office of Special Education, and she's been the one that's kind of helped clarify that. My guess is probably it is fine. The only thing she's kind of watching is there's a few that she knows that have been giving some misinformation that we're trying to avoid. So, but I have a feeling it will be fine.
It was pretty intensive. We had to take a test. I like a lot of what I saw on the other one, but I, in good faith, don't think I could.
Well, it is not the expectation that every teacher would do what's on the OK Edge. That it's there available for schools as a free option.
Right.
But it's certainly, I know other schools have done other things. The only thing I think that Michelle's just double checking is if for some reason, like she said, she knows there's some that have given maybe some misinformation, so that maybe we can follow up with teachers to clarify, hey, you might have heard this was incorrect, and we'll move forward from there. No, they don't need to repeat anything.
Okay, I think I had sent you the email. I'm just going to go get it and forward and get hers, and maybe there is an opportunity or way she could kind of preview, or I think the title of it's available. So
good.
That I really think it's going to fly, but I did check. So
that would be my guess as well. So I don't know that I would panic over that, but like I said, I am not the end point on that one. So I want to make sure I don't step on toes.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Melissa, I have a quick question, just real quick. It's about, I saw through some legislative alerts yesterday about one of the things that possibly adding to RSA monies, something about possibly having to use 10% of your budget for a certain kind of training. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So what's currently, it's in bill status right now, is that for schools or districts that receive more than $2,500 in RSA funds for the year, so that eliminates about 2 dozen. And hang on, Sharon, I just sent you a private message on that. So for districts that receive less than $2,500, it's saying you need to set aside at least 10% on professional development dealing with evidence-based literacy instruction, for making sure that we're making sure that our schools are aware of what they need to be doing for reading instruction. So like Diane, I know you've been doing a lot with letters. So things like letters or you're buying the material.
Right, and we're training our whole, everybody's going to be trained on letters, but we're
Sure.
not using it out of that fund. That's the only thing I was concerned with, is because our school district pays for a screener out of that fund, which takes a lot, and we do some other things. And so that's what I wanted to find out is, I mean, we don't have any problems doing that because we're going to be spending a lot of money doing that. It's just not coming out of that fund. And so that's what I was trying to figure out there.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite sure how that accountability is going to go, probably through accreditation.
Okay.
At least 25 or at least 10% of those funds, if that's just going to be a coding change.
Okay.
It also does not say that it has to be a professional development for all of your teachers. So in some cases, it might be spending, for a district that receives $2,500, so let's say that's $250, they might be sending one teacher to get some training and then come back and help other teachers too. So I know that was a question that had come up. I know that's not what you're asking per se, but just since we've got a few other people listening.
Okay.
That's, yeah. Okay. Anything else? I think that's it. All right, everyone. Well, we were going to end this fun showdown and we will talk with you later. Thank you.